Miss Drake screamed again. Ty jumped up and hurried down the long hallway. Just as he passed another hall, a sudden shadowy figure appeared. It collided with Ty. A shadow passed through the hall. Then Ty groaned and collapsed, and the light continued to flicker off and on. At the far end, the window still stood open. The curtains rustled in the night wind. The sound of cars and traffic floated up from the streets below. Charlie ran to the middle of the hall. "Ty, are you okay?" he asked. In the darkness, Ty mumbled, "Where is he?" The light turned back on. Charlie ran over to the open window. He brushed aside the waving curtain and leaned out. Far below on the sidewalk, people walked along as if nothing had happened. The outside of the building was smooth. The nearest window was closed. It was a straight down shot, at least a dozen stories to the ground. There was no latch, no roof, no awning, nothing that would have slowed down or caught the body of the falling Mr. Madagascar. Where was he? Miss Drake joined Charlie at the open window and looked out cautiously. The breeze tugged at her silver hair. "What happened?" she asked. "Where is he?" "Gone," said Charlie. Miss Drake's face turned pale. Charlie was afraid she was going to faint again. "That's impossible, young man," she said. "Even for a magician?" asked Charlie. The older woman stared hard at him. There was a glint of steel in her eyes. "Maybe not," she said. She looked at the sidewalk far below. Then her gaze wandered to the buildings across the street. "He was the master of levitation after all," she said. "But that's just fake magic," said Charlie. "I mean, it was a trick, right?" "A trick?" asked Miss Drake, leaned out the window for a final look. "Well, if it was a trick, then it was the greatest magic trick in the world. Madagascar would be the first human to fly." "That's impossible," Charlie thought, but a little voice inside him added, "Or is it?" Miss Drake adjusted her red robe, and Charlie noticed that it matched the waving curtain behind her. "That's funny," thought Charlie. "I thought the drapes were purple." Miss Drake said, "We need to take Tyler downstairs." Ty was sitting on the carpet, holding his head in his hands. "Where is he?" he mumbled again. "Mr. Madagascar jumped out the window," said Charlie. Do you think you might have a concussion?" Ty shook his head. "No, I mean the guy who ran into me." In the craziness, Charlie had forgotten all about the second figure. The lights had been off and on again. The lights had been going off and on then. The shadowy stranger must have escaped during a blackout. "I didn't get a good look at him," said Ty. "He looked tough, though." "I didn't see him either," said Charlie. He looked closer at Ty and added, "You look terrible." Ty's face was covered with bruises. "You two really banged into each other." "That should make him easy to find," said Ty, slowly getting to his feet. "Keep your eyes open for some jerk who looks like me covered in bruises." "Let's get you downstairs," said Miss Drake. They took an elevator to the first floor and led Ty to his family's rooms behind the lobby. Mrs. Yu was upset when they walked in. "Tyler, I've been looking everywhere for you," she cried. As soon as she gave her son a closer look, she screamed. "Look at your face," she yelled. "What happened to you? Go wash that off in the bathroom. And who is your friend?" "This is just a kid from school," Ty said, "and I'm okay," he added. "Does this have to do with Mr. Madagascar?" Mrs. Yu asked. Sort of," Ty said. He jumped out the window. Mrs. Yu shrieked. "I'm calling the police," she said. "These crazy magicians." Ty hurried Charlie down the hall as Mrs. Yu ran into the kitchen. In the bathroom, Charlie helped Ty wash crusted blood off his forehead. "I do look terrible," said Ty, staring into the mirror. You look like you ran into a wall, said Charlie. A couple of walls. Ty snorted. Well, man, it is all over. I can't get money from a guy who jumped out a window. Charlie looked at Ty's reflection in the mirror. I'm not so sure of that, he said. Are you kidding? Said Ty. He balled a towel up tightly in his fist. Madagascar jumped out that window. We both saw him. We need to go back upstairs, said Charlie, before the police get here. We need to examine the scene of the crime, and, he added, we need to figure out what these are. He pulled the strange plastic tubes from Mr. Madagascar's apartment out of his pockets and figure out what those dates on them mean, said Ty. The dates are from 1 week ago today, said Charlie. And didn't you say the lights were blinking off and on last week too? Ty nodded thoughtfully. Hey, have you noticed that the lights aren't blinking anymore? He said. Good call, thought Charlie. In fact, the lights had stopped flickering ever since Madagascar jumped. Was the blinking light somehow connected with the magician's disappearance? Okay, let's go back, said Tyler, throwing down a towel. Come on.